Welcome in, everybody, to what is finally the first ever episode of the A-Gap. I am your host, the pharaoh of the San Antonio sports podcasting scene, the voice of the voiceless, the hero that you definitely need but definitely do not deserve. I am Adam Fernandez, and we have a lot to talk about in the world of college football specifically, but a lot to talk about in sports generally. The show was supposed to air yesterday. I had an interview with Brandon Oliver. We'll get into him here in a little while. That was supposed to air with the podcast or with this episode. The interview was erased off of my computer. I didn't erase it. There were no gremlins that came in here and erased it. I think my Premiere Pro might have had a virus in it, and it deleted the interview. Thankfully, Brandon was extraordinarily gracious enough to come back today and reshoot the interview. And I honestly think that this version was the better version of the interview, on both my end and probably on his end. I don't know how he feels, but that's my take on it. We don't do a lot of, and let me also rewind here a little bit, because you guys know that, a lot of you know, if you've been longtime viewers or listeners of the show, that it used to be, it originally started off as Underdog Sports. Well, then I found out that there was already a group named Underdog Sports, and instead of getting into a legal battle with them, I decided to go ahead and I'll change the name. So I changed the name to Fourth and a Mile. And ran with Fourth and a Mile there for quite a long time. And then I realized that there was already a group called Fourth and a Mile that was also doing podcasts. So again, I had to change the name. And it's been a while since I've done that. It's been a while since we've aired because of that. But I was also kind of perfecting my craft, so to speak. With some of the classes that I'm taking at Full Sail University. Yes, I am a student over there at Full Sail University. To become a sports broadcaster. To do this for a living. How fucking awesome is that? To do this for a living. To talk sports with all of you guys. Specifically college football. The thing I love more than anything else, other than Alyssa. The thing I love more than anything else, college football and baseball. Specifically those. NFL football as well, but NFL football kind of ranks below college football and Major League Baseball to me. If you guys have seen the old shows, you probably know that to be 100% true and 100% accurate. And it's just far more fun to talk about college football than it is probably any other sport. But every now and then, you guys would also listen to me talk about pro wrestling. It came up every now and then. That's where Brandon Oliver comes in. He is the founder, the owner, the CEO, for lack of a better term, of River City Wrestling, based here in San Antonio, Texas. We have him on the show. He's going to be, we've already recorded the interview, like I said. That will be in the second part of this, the second segment of this episode. That was probably the most fun interview I've ever done. No offense to any of the other interviews I've done in the past. But those are all people that I typically know personally. This is a guy that I follow on social media because I'm a wrestling fan. And he just so happened to be gracious enough to grant me the interview. For several reasons. First off, it is a homework assignment, but also because I'm a huge wrestling fan, and he knows that I'm a huge wrestling fan. I always comment on a lot of his posts. He knows who I am, but he didn't know me personally, and same with, vice versa. It's great to have him on the show. I hope to do another interview with him really soon. Maybe after the next event, which is going to be on November 19th, but we're going to let him tell you guys all about that. All in all, this was a It was a blast of an interview that will be coming up here shortly after this first segment. But as typical, we are going to go ahead and start the first segment off with college football. This has been a incredibly crazy year so far this year. Crazy. Bizarre. Things happening that shouldn't happen. East Coast teams playing on the West Coast teams playing in the Big Ten. It's bonkers all over the place. I love those Fansville commercials, by the way. They're the absolute best commercials there are. But this has just been a very, very wild year. We're going to start talking, of course, about Texas A&M. Why? Because that's, one of my favorite football teams of all time, and because that's, when we have Chris on the show, he's the Texas A&M expert. And so I want to have another interview with him here sometime next week after this week's game against Arkansas. We will be discussing that with him. We will be discussing a lot of stuff with him if he decides to come back on and join us again. But Texas A&M, they came into this season with incredibly high expectations. They had the number one recruiting class in the entire country. The first time that has ever happened for Texas A&M. It's kind of unfair expectations because of that. A lot of people I think had the expectation that they had the number one recruiting class in the country. There you go. They're going to be the national champions. That's not how that works. The top recruiting class is just that. They're true freshmen coming in, fresh from high school, have never played a down of college football in their life. That being said, you really don't know. You get a pretty good idea of what you got before, but you really don't know what you got until you see it on the field against real competition. And that's not saying that any of these freshmen for Texas A&M have completely just blown up and have just fallen apart. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But to think that they're going to be at their very best their freshman year, that's just not the case, man. That's not how it works. That's not how it goes. Texas A&M, we expected them to wipe the floor with Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State's going to be a FBS team here, I believe, next year. And they did. 31-0. Wiped the floor with them. We expected them to do the same thing to Appalachian State. And that's where our expectations kind of fell to the wayside. Appalachian State went into that game with a vastly superior game plan. They went into that game with vastly superior coaching decisions. Not saying that there's anything wrong with Jimbo Fisher as far as that goes. He's where he's at for a reason. But it also looked like in that game that he kind of took a step back and was just like, yeah, we got this one wrapped up. The entire team played like they did not care. They end up losing to Appalachian State. Appalachian State is one of the scariest teams you'll ever face in college football. They are a group of 5 team. They play in the Sun Belt Conference. They shouldn't be able to beat SEC teams or Big Ten teams or Pac-12 teams or Big 12 teams or ACC teams. But it seems like they always do. It always seems like they go in there and they play those schools far harder than what those schools expected them to do. They did beat Texas A&M the week before. They came that close to beating North Carolina. Texas A&M, I think, is a far better team than North Carolina, but you should have paid attention to that if you're Texas A&M. These guys go and they play whoever they play at their home, and they give you a fight. And Texas A&M just did not see that coming that week. Last week, I was at the game with Miami. Haynes King, I hope he ends up being a really good quarterback. I hope he ends up having a long, great career. I have nothing against the guy personally. He was not getting the job done. 2 straight weeks. And, there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, yeah, he had a really good week the week before, the one against Sam Houston State, which, to be honest with you, he really did not. He had a really good second half for as long as he was in there. And that was because a lot of that was mop-up duty. His first half was pretty unspectacular. The Appalachian State game, he looked like he did not belong there. He looked like he was the vastly overachieving quarterback in that game. He looked like the guy that should have been the third string quarterback. He started the game. He lost that game to Appalachian State. So, fast forward to last week against Miami, Jimbo Fisher finally realized that Haynes King is not ready to compete at this level. He very well may be soon. He very well may never be. Who knows? But I do believe that we've seen the last of Haynes King in College Station as far as a starter, unless something happens to Max Johnson. Because Max Johnson came out against Miami, who is a better team than Appalachian State. No matter which way you look at it, they are a better team. Miami has put up huge numbers on everyone they've played up until Texas A&M. Texas A&M, the defense came to play. The defense did play. They had a few times where they got a little tight there, but they were able to hold off that really good Miami offense. It also took a couple of Miami miscues, a missed field goal, a blocked field goal, a muffed punt to help Texas A&M win the game. But that's how you win football games, is you capitalize on those miscues, and Texas A&M did. So, they came out and played a lot better, I think, than what they did against Appalachian State. Yes, it was another low-scoring tight game. 17-9 was the final score there. It was a fun time there. If you're an Aggie fan and you have never been to Kyle Field, I totally recommend going there. It is one of the most awe-inspiring 3 hours you will ever have in your life. It is just amazing to be there. The crowd is the friendliest group of fans you will ever meet. Prime example, we were there for Step Off about 2 hours or so before the game. A couple guys from Miami came walking on by, and some old guys that were Texas A&M fans stopped them and said, "Hey, you guys are in the wrong place," or "You guys are in the right place." No, seriously, you guys are in the right place. Like, turn around, you guys want to see this. Talking about the Texas Aggie band and the cannon that shoots off before they start. Those guys, I'm telling you right now, those Miami fans have never had a better time in their life than hanging out with these old Aggie fans. I'm sorry, I'm a little parched. That was a fun moment for them and pretty much anybody that goes to a Texas A&M football game. It is always a fun time. But back to the game, it was, a good showing by the defense. The offense still left a lot to be desired, but they were against Miami's defense, not Appalachian State's defense, and they looked better. Max Johnson looked a lot better than what Haynes King did the week before. Hopefully they can grow on that. They have Arkansas this week, tomorrow, at Jerry's World in Dallas, or Arlington. And, man, I got a ball of phlegm here, guys. That's just, bleh. Sorry, I didn't mean to gross you guys out. They're going to be taking on Arkansas tomorrow. Arkansas is ranked number 10 in the country, undefeated right now. They have played, they struggled last week. The week before week one, in week one, they beat Cincinnati, which was a good game. Cincinnati was not the Cincinnati that they were last year. So Arkansas was able to squeak by them. But do not think for 1 second, if you're Texas A&M, that you're going to go in here and roll over Arkansas. This is not the Arkansas from 2-3 years ago. This is a way different program. They are good. KJ Jefferson is a phenomenal quarterback. A&M needs to be on their toes for this game. They can't have another App State debacle. Arkansas is number 10 in the country. That means the voters are saying that this is the 10th best team in the country. Appalachian State's not even in the top 25. If you look down at our scroll bar, you can see that. Appalachian State is in the group of outside looking in. So Texas A&M does need to be at their absolute best tomorrow. They can't afford to go into the rest of the schedule. Mississippi State, Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida down the line, LSU at the end of the season, being 2-2 at this point. They need to be 3-1 going into the rest of the season. They need to stay 2 wins at least ahead of their losses. Probably more than that if they want to have a good year where Jimbo Fisher comes back next year. Because I think, really, Jimbo Fisher has never felt the hot seat at Texas A&M as much as he did after the Appalachian State loss. That was, I would say, about 50% of Aggie fans across the country were calling for his firing. I was one of them. I kind of, granted it was a brash decision for me to yell out, "Fire Jimbo Fisher." I'm letting cooler heads prevail and saying, yeah, let him keep his job. But if he doesn't straighten things out and get this to be a top 10 caliber team, which is what they should be, then maybe by the end of the year you need to look elsewhere. Speaking of looking elsewhere, this is a big story that came out this week. Herm Edwards, after 5 years with Arizona State, shown the door after losing to Eastern Michigan. He's never really had a bad year at Arizona State, but he's never had a good year either. And losing to, did I say Michigan State? I'm sorry, Eastern Michigan. Losing to Eastern Michigan, there's no excuse for that if you're a Power 5 team losing to Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan is not App State at all. So yeah, losing to them, that was his swan song. He's gone. Couple names that have come up that are big names to replace him out there. One of them is probably the name that you're going to hear a lot as head coaches are let go. You're still also hearing him in the talks for Nebraska, and that's Urban Meyer. I think Urban Meyer is more likely to go to Nebraska than he is Arizona State. But who knows? He had some success out there on the West Coast when he coached Utah. But he's also had success in the Big Ten with Ohio State. So I think he's more likely to go with Nebraska than he is with Arizona State. But at the same time, I don't even know how likely he is to go with Nebraska either. But the other big name that has come up is a guy that I really don't think is all that likely to go to Arizona State either, and that is Deion Sanders. The reason I say that, Deion Sanders wanted to get a job at a big-time program before he signed on with Jackson State. He wanted to. He really did. Nobody would grant him that shot. The one he really wanted was Florida State, but they went ahead and went with Mike Norvell. Florida State has had a lot of problems under Mike Norvell, and Willie Taggart too, for that matter, before Mike Norvell. They pretty much saw the collapse of their program, a once vaunted top-tier caliber program, who this year is actually looking pretty good. So I'm not going to sit here and bash Mike Norvell when I'm talking about Deion Sanders. But they offered Mike Norvell the job, not Deion Sanders. Mike Norvell has a lot more experience as a head coach than Deion Sanders. Mike Norvell has a winning history as a head coach before being hired by Florida State. So hiring Mike Norvell didn't make sense, but that was the one job. Okay, guys, we are back. Sorry about that. Just I'm not going to get into what happened there. Weird. It's related to that ball of phlegm that I was telling y'all about earlier. But back to where we were about Deion Sanders. He wanted to go to Florida State. They didn't hire him. They hired Mike Norvell. Then he got the job at Jackson State. Since being there, he's had a hell of a recruiting class. 50-something was his recruiting class last year, which doesn't sound like a lot when we're just talking about Texas A&M being the number one recruiting class in the country, but Jackson State's an FCS school. They should not be in even the top 100 recruiting classes. He had a better recruiting class than a ton of big-time programs at little old Jackson State. He said during the offseason that, he wants to build on these HBSCs, these historically black colleges, HBCs, I guess. He wanted to go ahead and stay with those and, keep building it up. Now, if the offer is right, he might go to Arizona State, but the guy already has quite a bit of money. He's a Hall of Famer, NFL Hall of Famer. Played a ton of years in the NFL. Still has a bunch of money on the side from different things that he's done. I don't see him wanting to leave Jackson State for something like Arizona State. I think he'd be willing to leave for Florida State, Miami, which he's not going to get hired on there because Mario Cristobal's there. But a big-time program like that in the South. Maybe an SEC school. When Nick Saban decides to go ahead and retire, maybe he'll be happy to take Alabama. I don't see him taking Arizona State. To be honest with you, I think next year he's going to be at Jackson State as the head coach. Not because he's not going to be getting offers, because these schools know what he can do recruiting-wise. I think he's going to be at Jackson State because he wants to be at Jackson State. And who can blame him? They've done nothing but treat him like a king. He basically runs that program. He's done a great job out there. Percentage-wise, he's one of the highest one of the highest win percentage coaches in the history of Jackson State. There's no reason for him to leave outside of maybe just wanting to go to a bigger program, and I don't think that he does. I think he's very happy to be at Jackson State at a historically black college and build a winner there. I believe that he can build a winner there. He can get a national championship. He's undefeated so far this year. Who knows? He might be able to get a national championship there this year. Then who knows? Maybe eventually Jackson State will try to go up to the FBS. Who knows? So, all in all, I don't see Deion leaving Jackson State for Arizona State. I don't see Urban Meyer going to Arizona State when Nebraska's sitting wide open. I don't know where Arizona State goes after this. Do I think the right move was to fire Herm Edwards? Absolutely, I do. I never thought he was a good hire there. Yes, he's had some good years, but he's never had a great year. Right now, the Pac-12 is suffering because UCLA and USC are bolting for the Big Ten. You can bet that there's some pressure by Pac-12 upper management for Arizona State to bring in someone big, someone to make them a power. I just don't know who's out there. I mean, I can't think of anybody. It would be Urban Meyer and it would be Deion Sanders are the two biggest names right now that are being circulated as possible head coaches next year. I don't think either one of them want to go to Arizona State over where they could also be or already are. So, best of luck to Arizona State in trying to find someone. But let's go over the schedule here for this week. Yep, you saw that athleticism right there. We're going to start with going through the top 25 here. That's really all we're going to do is the top 25 of the schedule for them this week. We're going to start with number 1, Georgia. They have been number 1 since Alabama almost lost to Texas in week 2. They are 3-0 right now in the year. They're playing Kent State this tomorrow. I don't see any reason for Georgia to be at all worried about Kent State. Alabama. Alabama are 3-0 right now. They'd been number 1, had that squeak by in Texas. So right now they are number 2 in the country. They are 3-0 on the season, but they are number 2, and they are taking on Vanderbilt. That's another team that Vanderbilt, yes, is an SEC team just like Alabama, but it's Vanderbilt. Alabama should go in there and roll all over them. Ohio State, out of the top 3 teams, has probably the stiffest competition this week, going up against Wisconsin, who's fighting to get in the top 25. Ohio State right now 3-0 on the year. They're playing at home in Columbus against the Badgers. I see Ohio State winning it, but I think it's going to be a really close game because I don't think Ohio State is quite as good as what they think they are right now. They could be by the end of the season, but as of right now, after struggling with Notre Dame in week 1, I'm just not sure how sold I am on Ohio State. Michigan, number 4, taking on 3-0 right now, taking on Maryland at home. Michigan should have no problem running over Maryland. Yes, Maryland's a Big Ten team just like they are, but Maryland is like the Vanderbilt of the Big Ten. So Michigan should have no problem with that one. Clemson, number 5, taking on Wake Forest. This is actually going to be a tough test for Clemson. Wake Forest is not a bad team. I think they're a lot better than where they stand right now. So Clemson is luckily they're playing at Wake Forest. This will be a really tough win or really tough game for Clemson. If that offense can step it up and start playing like the old offense that Clemson used to have, they should win it. But Wake Forest has a pretty good offense, themselves. It could be a tough game for Clemson. Oklahoma is going to be hosting Kansas State. Oklahoma, number 6 in the country, 3-0. I definitely see them knocking off Kansas State. Kansas State's, they're probably mid-level Big 12 right now. Maybe not even that. I think right now Kansas might be the better of the 2 Kansas schools. So Oklahoma should win that one. Southern Cal hosting Oregon State. USC has actually not looked too bad since Lincoln Riley took over there. He took some of his Oklahoma guys with him. They're actually looking pretty impressive. Do I think that they're playoff caliber? Maybe not quite yet, but they're not too far off. They're taking on Oregon State. They should be able to win that one. Kentucky taking on Northern Illinois. Kentucky, number 8 in the country, 3-0. They should be able to handle Northern Illinois. Oklahoma State, number 8 in the country. They are 3-0 as well. They have a bye this week. Then we get into the fun game that we were talking about earlier. Arkansas, technically at Texas A&M, playing up there in Jerry World. I see Texas A&M winning this, but not by a lot. I don't think that they are quite the level that they thought they were at the beginning of the season. But I think they're getting closer to that level. So I say Texas A&M, but maybe by a field goal. Tennessee and Florida, another big game this week in Knoxville. The Volunteers seem to be back. UT is back, but not the UT that has claimed to be back for the past 7 years. Right now, at least, Tennessee is sitting at 3-0. They're taking on Florida, who is not a bad football team themselves. They had a tough loss to Kentucky in week 2. But outside of that, Florida's actually looked really good. So I do see Tennessee winning this one. They are playing in Knoxville, but I think it's going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be close. and I don't think you're going to be able to knock Florida too far down after this loss. NC State taking on UConn, number 12 in the country, 3-0. The Huskies, not so much. NC State should be able to run right over them. Utah, number 13 in the country, 2-1, taking on Arizona State, the Arizona State we were just talking about. Utah should be able to handle this one pretty simply. Yeah, that's what I said. Penn State, number 14 in the country, taking on Central Michigan. Penn State should be able to run over Central Michigan. If they don't, then you might see what happened to Herm Edwards. What happened to James Franklin. But I doubt it. They're 3-0 right now. They should be fine. Oregon is bounced back after that week 1 drubbing by Georgia. They are 2-1 right now in the year, number 15 in the country. They are taking on Washington State at Washington State. I still think Oregon's got the better team. They should win that one pretty handily. Ole Miss taking on Tulsa. Ole Miss, number 16 in the country, 3-0 on the year. Should be able to beat Tulsa pretty handily as well. Washington, number 18 at Stanford. Washington has actually been a surprise team. I don't think a lot of people picked them to be 3-0 to start the year. I don't think a lot of people picked them to be in the top 25 3 weeks in. Yet here they are. They were unranked last week. They're taking on Stanford this week at home. I really see Washington win this. I think Stanford's going to put up a bit of a fight, especially after last week against USC. I think they're going to put up a fight this week against Washington, but I still think Washington takes it. BYU, number 19 in the country, after a beatdown by Oregon. BYU is now number 19 in the country. They are 2-1 on the year, and they will be taking on Wyoming at home. That should be a game that they just completely run over Wyoming. I think they're at a vastly higher level than the Mountain West Conference, and Wyoming right now is standing at the bottom of the Mountain West. BYU should be able to handle this one pretty easily. Get back to the Florida and Tennessee game. We already said that I expect Tennessee to win that one. Wake Forest will lose by a little bit to Clemson, I think. Texas, number 22 in the country, playing in Lubbock at Texas Tech. I always pick Texas to lose, so why not just continue the trend there? I already said I expect Texas A&M to squeak past Arkansas. Pitt will be hosting University of Rhode Island. Pitt's number 24 in the country, 2-1 on the year. They should have no problem with University of Rhode Island. Just like Miami at number 25, they fell from 13 down to 25 after losing Texas A&M last week. I'd say they're going to bounce back. Kyle Van Dyke will have one of the best games of his career, and they will just destroy Middle Tennessee State at Hard Rock Stadium. So that's how the top 25 schedule looks. The teams on the outside looking in: Michigan State, Florida State, Appalachian State, North Carolina, Washington State, Cincinnati, Oregon State, Minnesota, Kansas. Kansas, I really do believe, are a lot better of a team than what they're getting, or than what we expected them to be. But I also don't think that they're quite as good as what we're giving them credit for being. But I can be proven wrong. So Syracuse, I got to look to see how they did. They when I started the program, they were beating Virginia, but a lot could have changed since then. In fact, the game's over already, so I just don't know what the score was. LSU and then Wisconsin also on the outside looking in. So this is going to be a fun week starting tomorrow morning. I can't wait to see it. I will let you guys know my feelings on it maybe as early as tomorrow night. We'll see. But stay tuned. I have the interview with Brandon Oliver next. And yeah, I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. So, all right. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it now. I'll see you guys again maybe tomorrow night, maybe Sunday night. We'll see. All right. Be good and love you guys.
Just got back from New Orleans, where the cops are on the take and you can drink with teens. Right before land is Taurus season, with pageants and parades for no apparent reason. Got a titty flash from the girl of my dreams, bought some $1.95 purple plastic beads.
Welcome back, everybody, to the A-Gap. I am Adam Fernandez, the host of the A-Gap. Every now and then on the show, well, all the time on the show, you really hear me talk a lot about football, a little bit about baseball, but every now and then you hear me talk about professional wrestling. And in that sense, that's where our guest tonight comes from, the world of professional wrestling. He is the founder, the owner, lead promoter of River City Wrestling, based here in San Antonio. I speak, of course, of Bam Bam or
Oh,
Boom Boom. I'm sorry, Oliver. I don't know where I came up with Bam Bam. I don't know where that came out of.
yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, so how
It's
you
all
doing
good.
tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite.
You're welcome. I appreciate you coming on here. Do you mind telling us first off where your love of professional wrestling first came from?
Sure. So I was an 80s latchkey kid, with a single parent and, from the 80s. And, in the 80s, I watched all the other stuff you were supposed to watch, right? Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Transformers and G.I. Joe. And then in the second grade, one of my classmates said, "Hey, you need to watch this thing." Or actually, they were talking it over, and they were like, "Yeah, this all American guy was, beating up this Iranian guy," and and I was like, "Well, that sounds kind of interesting." And they're like, "Yeah, it's wrestling. Tune in at this time and blah blah." And so I watched it, and it was the most spectacular thing I've ever seen in my life. It was so larger than life. It completely beat everything that I was watching. I mean, just I love the characters and the feuds and the rivalries, and it was awesome. It beat everything, um, like I said, that I've ever seen. And I became obsessed. I wouldn't even say it's love. I would say it was an obsession, and complete with dragging my poor mom all over the country for shows and watching every minute I could of wrestling, whether it was WWF or the territories, and and so after high school, I moved to Florida for a little bit, started finding out about the inside of wrestling, and then I moved back to Texas to attend a wrestling school.
Awesome. So, what out of all of that made you want to create RCW?
So I started RCW admittedly a little earlier than I should have. Now that was always my game plan, even though I went to the Shawn Michaels Academy, which was the hardest thing I've ever done, and was basically just getting beat up inside of this like air conditioned less, heatless, old like warehouse above a Mexican food restaurant, and by far it was the hardest thing I ever. I mean, I'm not saying I'm Mr. Athletic, but I mean, I played some sports, and was way harder. But my goal was always to be a promoter. I always believe that if you're going to do something, especially what I consider to be the top position of a company, you should know everything about it. You should know how everything works, how everything is done, and you should pay your dues a little bit. And I feel that's actually one of the critical problems with independent wrestling today, is that a lot of promoters just buy their way in. They watch Raw, they watch SmackDown, and they got a little bit of money, and they spend it on wrestling. But for me, I wanted to always be a promoter, but I wanted to pay my dues and do it the right way. And so the first couple of years after Shawn Michaels Academy, so this was 2002, I graduated the Shawn Michaels Academy in 2000. And after Shawn had closed the TWA, I mean, I was working these shows where there was like, 6 people in the crowd. And I would say at least 3 of them I was responsible for, and it just didn't make sense to me to do all the work that's needed to do a show. That includes the setup and the teardown and the promoting of it and all that stuff. for 6 people. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I was young and I was like, you know what, I know I could do better. And so I launched RCW 2002, admittedly earlier than I should have, um, but yeah, I mean, I was just like, I know I could at least draw a couple hundred, if not more than that. But I didn't understand why we would spend our entire weekend doing a show, setting up for a show, and then have 6 to 8 people in the crowd. It just didn't make any sense to me. We could have done that at the wrestling school. So that was kind of what prompted me to start at RCW a little early. But my goal was always to be a promoter. Even when I was a kid, I would have notebooks, just like stacks of notebooks, of cards that I would basically act out or act out with the wrestling figures or a video game. Um, the early days of e-fetting on America Online, those types of things where I'd spend, 2 nights working on a show card for for an e-fed. Um, that was always my goal. I promoted extreme backyard boxing in high school, and so that was always my goal. Is just to be that person that is kind of the carnival barker, and so that was my goal, and I did it. Now
So
we're here years later.
yeah, been in business now for over 20 years now. How many big names that are big names in the sport today have stepped foot inside of a RCW ring?
I mean, so yeah, it's been pretty cool to see, I mean, of course, RCW brings down legends. We brought down tons of WWE Hall of Famers, and Jake the Snake Roberts, Million Dollar Man, and Road Warrior Animal, Ricky Steamboat, and even like some of the newer names like from Impact or AEW. I mean, we got Cody Rhodes right when he was released from WWE.
I remember.
Um, yeah, and so we've had a lot of legends and big names come through, but we've also had talent that we've developed, or that have made their way up through us, that are now in WWE or AEW, like Keith Lee, Sammy Guevara, Oni Lorcan. There's more that are escaping my top of my mind right now, but I mean those are the ones. Hernandez, Lance Hoyt, Lance Archer. So it's been pretty cool to see, and then we're seeing it right now with Luigi Primo, who's gone insanely viral, with millions and millions and millions of views on his video, interviews with Fox News and Sports Illustrated, and so it's really cool to see, the guys make it and achieve their dreams. And right now, Luigi Primo is definitely deserving of it, and he's a viral sensation.
Speaking of Luigi, I know that a couple weeks ago, maybe it was even just last week, uh, I saw that you took a little umbrage with a man who's considered a legend in the sport, a guy that I grew up watching, Jim Cornette, uh, making some comments about Luigi Primo. And we know that he's really just not too fond of the state of professional wrestling today as opposed to what it was back when he was major in it. What is your take on the state of wrestling?
So, man, that's a big question. Um, I certainly respect Jim Cornette's opinion. He's a legend in the industry. And ultimately he's just trying to protect the business, and he's trying to protect wrestling. The reality of it is, though, that much like any other industry, wrestling has evolved. I mean, the foundations are always going to be the same, like, music has updated, movies have updated, but that doesn't change the basics of the notes of a song or a hero's journey in a movie, right? Like, there's just some things that are always consistent in the foundation, but at the same time, you can't insult the intelligence of your audience by not updating and just being like, oh hey, look, things have never changed. Wrestling is entertainment. It's been outed as entertainment since the early 90s with Vince McMahon. I mean, even WWE, the E is for entertainment.
Mhm.
So it's not the 60s, 70s, and 80s where there is that mystique and that veil between reality and the fantasy. Now that veil is completely removed and gone, and so you have to adapt. You have to start to sit there and say, are we going to adapt as a business and make this, I know this will drive him crazy, but a performance art, or are we going to still consider this a sport? Well, sport is kind of like, baseball, right? Like you can look up a person's stats. If
Right.
they bat 350 with 50 runs, they're a good player.
Yeah.
And in wrestling, there isn't anything. There's not any sort of intangibles to begin a criteria of assessing who is truly better and the best and stuff like that. I mean, we could point to a couple of things, but they're very loose. And so it's kind of like you kind of want to update it, and you kind of don't want to pull the wool over their eyes. And Luigi's such a great character. I mean, his look, his mannerisms, his face, his manner of speech. I mean, it's awesome. And so I can understand where Jim Cornette's coming from. He's coming from the era of Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen, and a very believable era. But at the same time, he also wore outrageous outfits, and had a tennis racket and was a mama's boy, right? So
Yep.
he's well aware of gimmicks, and granted, I mean, that was one of the things I told Luigi, when I first started using them, 3 or 4 years ago. Is like, man, you got to get bigger, and he's working on it. So that way his body starts to look a little bit more incredible. But I mean, it's such an awesome gimmick. People just want to be entertained, and I don't think there's that. I mean, you have suspension of disbelief, but then at the same time, it's like, if the story is good, if the characters grab you, I mean, it is what it is. There's a ton of guys in AEW that I think could not pass the test in the 80s. I mean, Danhausen and Orange Cassidy, and
Yep.
but at the same time, the crowd loves them. And so, where do you sit there and say, like, hey, the business has evolved? Foundation is still the same, but the business has evolved, and this is what it's now, doing. So that's a roundabout answer. I mean, if you want to know like the state of the business, I mean, come on, WWE is global. The biggest box office stars in Hollywood are former wrestlers. The Rock and Cena's catching up. John Cena's getting all these big gigs. I mean, WWE could go to Cowboy Stadium or AT&T Stadium and fill it up. So I mean, they're not. I mean, AEW is a deep. Yeah, AEW is a nice alternative. They got TBS and TNT. I mean, it's good. I mean, one could argue, was the Attitude Era better or the Golden Era of the '80s better? I mean, you can in certain respects, sure, absolutely. But I mean, it's healthy.
So, with all that being said, is there any hope for the era of kayfabe to come back?
I mean,
Which is, I think, what Jim Cornette wants.
yeah, the era of kayfabe. I mean, here's the best way I could say it. Like, you have Sylvester Stallone, and he's Rocky, right? And he plays the character Rocky in the movie. If we go back to the era of kayfabe, that's like Stallone going, in the media and to personal appearances and stuff like that, and being like, I'm not Stallone, I'm Rocky. I'm Rocky Balboa. right? I don't know who the Sylvester Stallone is,
Yeah.
you know? So that era again is gone, because if you try to pull the wool over their eyes, you know, it's just it's not going to happen. It's insulting the intelligence. Now, Stallone could play Rocky, and I mean, it's awesome. I love Creed. I love all the Rockies, and they're such great stories and such a great character that, I mean, I don't even worry about Stallone in real life. You know, I mean, there's even actors, I'm sure, you know, that you don't even really like, maybe personally, you know, but the character on the screen is good, and so you're kind of like, man, you know, not a super huge fan of the guy personally, but
Yeah.
this is a damn good movie, you know. And so, you know, that's how I look at kayfabe. That's not coming back. The veil's been lifted, and you know, it's been lifted for a long time. I remember when I was a kid in high school in the early to mid '90s, when like the internet was becoming a thing. I remember sneaking into like the library at school, and then like I would look up real names of wrestlers, and then like it would come up with like a database or like a web page, like listing out the real names. I remember printing it out and then like telling my friends, "Oh my God, do you know that Hulk Hogan's real name is Terry Bollea?" Right? Like it was, you know, it was pretty. That, you know, that's what I'm saying. That era is not coming back. You know, but could you still have a really good character and a really good concept and story? Absolutely. You know, I think we still get sucked into it whenever there's like a big surprise or a big debut or, you know, whatever. I mean, that's why we still watch it.
Yeah, like the CM Punk when he first arrived at AEW, that was probably one of the biggest moments in wrestling over the past 5 years. Easy, I think, as far as the crowd reaction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean that. I mean, there's been other ones. I mean, even I remember John Cena coming back at that summer. I think it was SummerSlam or Money in the Bank with
Yeah.
Roman Reigns. You know, and just like, you know, the crowd reaction for that. Yeah, we've seen a lot of great moments, you know,
Mhm.
and so but yeah, Punk is up there. You know, there's a few others definitely within the past few years that definitely capture people's interest. And you know, I hear rumors of even tonight on SmackDown, so we'll see. Um, you know, but you know, but that's what makes it fun. And
Yeah.
so you can't still do characters and story that's super rich and captures you.
So you've pretty much expanded the fan base of RCW. You got people from outside of San Antonio who stream or who drive down here to watch the shows that you guys put on. Do you have any desire whatsoever to expand RCW out to maybe even just in, like some of the other areas in Texas?
None whatsoever. We're San Antonio. We're San Antonio through and through, and I'm a big believer. You know, I grew up watching the territories,
Mhm.
AWA World Class, Southwest Championship, you know, so on and so forth, Georgia Championship, Mid South, et cetera, et cetera. And so, even though WWF, you know, went national, and we all know the whole story,
Yeah.
you know, and then WWF eventually competed with WCW, and then bought out WCW. I mean, I was always for wrestling, and I always understood also as a professional the value of community. And so, it, you know, I'm going to know San Antonio better than a Dallas promoter, and vice versa. I'm not going to know the city of Dallas as well as someone that resides there and is active in the community and has lots of partnerships and contacts. You know, it's pointless for me to try to run there, because I would rather send up a couple of guys to maybe represent RCW in a match or a title match on that show than go up there and compete. So I'm a big believer in that. I believe you know your own community the best. And so I don't want to be anything more than San Antonio's brand of professional wrestling. You know, but I mean, people could always watch us, you know, on the live stream.
Yeah, you do have the streaming service, so people
Yeah,
can watch that. And
but I've done a couple of things. Like I did a show during Mania, WrestleMania weekend this past week, year in Dallas, and I only did that for no other reason than to just check off doing a show during the Mania weekend because I doubt San Antonio will ever get Mania. And
Yeah.
so, I was like, man, I told the guys there, I was like, I'm not coming out to compete, whatever. In fact, I want to work with you, but I'm just a big believer in the territories and having a community and knowing it well. I've also seen so many, we've seen so many companies, so many upstarts. I'm gonna compete with WWE, and that's like saying, hey, let's launch a basketball league, and we're going to compete with the NBA. The WWE is pop culture. It is Coca-Cola. It is Disney. It's not you're not going to compete. You can be an alternative. You could be a great alternative like AEW. I don't think it's quite the crowd WWE is, but AEW is a good alternative. And so. And I'm just a fan of wrestling. I want to see more wrestling. So, but anyway, that's a long answer to your question. But
No, I appreciate the long answers because it gives more substance to the answer. So,
absolutely,
what is, in your opinion, the best part of owning RCW?
The fans, 100% the fans. There's some other cool aspects too, but the fans, it is so cool when I see fans meet their heroes, because that reminds me of me and my fandom, and going to all sorts of meet and greets and stalking the wrestlers or whatever. Oh, I hear they're over here, and you go over there, but and so, I love it when I'm watching them and then, trying to come up with something to say. They're nervous as hell, or, their hand is shaking. Oh, I was a big fan, blah, blah. And then of course the show itself, I love the reaction of the crowd. I think there's nothing like it. I like taking an audience on a journey. And so, it's not just what they call a cheap pop. I like them. I like to actually take them on a journey of highs and lows, and so that's the best part, man. I really dig the fans when I see fans wearing an RCW shirt like out and about, or I've even seen RCW fans wear a shirt in Japan, and it's totally crazy. I'm like, wow, like
That's pretty cool.
who would have thought,
Yeah.
And so that part, will always, because there's a lot that goes into running a promotion. It's a lot more than putting wrestler A versus wrestler B, and then wrestler C comes out to attack wrestler A to set up a future match. That's the easy stuff. Like that's I taught high school for a little bit, and people always ask, what was, the easy and the hard part. I was like, the easy stuff was coming up with the lesson plans. Like, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be like some Dangerous Minds, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna change lives, right? And that was the fun part. That was the creative part.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work and a lot of BS and
Yeah.
of promotion, and but at the end of the day, and there's times, man, I'm telling you, I'm setting up for a show, whatever. I'm like, this is it. This is my last one, or this is my last year, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll have the show and the crowd and everything. I'll be like, well, okay, we'll keep this thing going, And so, that's why I say the fans. Of course, the boys, having them achieve their dreams, is awesome too. But it was without a doubt the fans number one.
Awesome. So for the viewers of the show and my classmates too, because this is also going as a assignment, Where can they find RCW or Brandon Oliver, or streaming and all that? Social media.
So the main things to find RCW is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're at RCW Forever, all one word. And then we also have our website, rivercitywrestling.net. And from there, you can follow the links to the RCW network, which has a lot of the newer shows, but also some classic shows back when we were recording them on analog and not even on digital, to show you how long that's been. And so, yeah, they can find us there. And again, RCW Forever on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Awesome. And can I see Supermex on the RCW or on the RCW stream? Does he have any matches on there? Hernandez?
Yeah, he's on there.
Sweet. Yeah, he's one of my all-time favorites personally. So
Very good.
So awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on again. I've already told the wife that the next show you guys do, we are definitely going to be there. We're going to be the first people buying tickets. When is your next show, if you already have anything planned?
It's going to be Saturday, November 19th. It's going to be at the Good Shepherd Activity Center over on Goliad. And that's actually a venue we ran back in like 2010 to maybe 12. And so we haven't done a show there in like 10 years. And, we just talked, and I was like, man, Good Shepherd used to be one of my favorite venues. And so they were like, okay, let's run a show. So for like the first time, like at least 9 or 10 years, we're running a show there. But yeah, it's Saturday, November 19th.
Sweet. Awesome. I will be there with the wife, so you can count on us. All right, Brandon.
All right.
Great. It's been great. I love having you on. I hope you can come on again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
All right. You have a good night.
All right. Thank you.